During the Bahrain Grand Prix, one of the biggest talking points was the team orders tension at RB between teammates Yuki Tsunoda and Daniel Ricciardo. Both Yuki and Daniel had fairly similar strategies, opting for the two-stop, pitting within a lap of each other after each stint. On lap 34 in the fight for P12, when Yuki came out of the pits, he initially jumped K-Mag, but with the Haas's tyres already up to working temperature, having stopped a couple of laps before, K-Mag then re-overtook Yuki. At that point, Ricciardo left the pits on a set of brand new soft tyres, and the important thing to note was that at this point on lap 37, Yuki was already within the DRS range of K-Mag, whilst Ricciardo was over 9 seconds behind Yuki. This is an important piece of information because from lap 37 to 51, as Ricciardo was closing that 9-second gap on the softer tyre, Yuki couldn't get past K-Mag. When Ricciardo finally got to within DRS range of Yuki, this is where the gap really started to close up, with Yuki now completely on the rear wing of the Haas, looking closer than ever. But it's at this point that with the laps running down, the team radioed in for the drivers to swap positions. Although the radios are a little bit delayed on the broadcast compared to when the drivers actually hear them, on roughly lap 51 is when Ricciardo was told that they'd swapped the drivers, to which Yuki on lap 52 replied with, "Are you kidding me? Now?" Ricciardo, frustrated, then in response to not being let through, radioed in to say, "Yeah, I don't need to say anything," at which point Yuki did then let Ricciardo through. I think that part is important to remember because it's not as if Yuki completely defied team orders and completely ignored what the team was saying. He was frustrated for a couple of laps, but he did then do what the team was actually asking. Ricciardo, however, despite the tyre offset, wasn't able to pass K-Mag in the remaining laps of the race, with Yuki still frustrated, even telling his race engineer, "He has got to speed up, man," indicating that Ricciardo didn't exactly have a huge amount of pace more than what Yuki had originally. As a side note, by the way, I think a little bit of credit also has to go to K-Mag. He drove really well, making absolutely no mistakes under pressure whilst defending from two teammates on two different tyre compounds and with no DRS from the car in front. He was the reason the RB drivers were as frustrated as they are, and it seems at least from the first race that hopefully the Haas this year is a better race car compared to last year. After the checkered flag, however, is where things got a little bit silly. During the cooldown lap, Yuki, clearly wanting to show his frustration, dived down the inside of Ricciardo, locking up into turn 8, and then aggressively drove past him, narrowly missing him on purpose. As you can imagine, Ricciardo wasn't very impressed over team radio, calling him a helmet and then some, which I must say is the first time I've ever heard any driver use that phrase over team radio. After the race, Ricciardo, despite trying to hold himself back with his PR driver training that we all know, couldn't stop himself entirely and branded Tsunoda as immature. Despite both drivers clearly being irritated about the situation, and probably a little bit with each other as well, there was a lot of damage control being done after the race, with neither driver really wanting to comment too much on the incident. And now, I saw loads of people on social media be surprised that this sort of incident would happen between characters like Yuki and Daniel, especially given the fact that, although there were flashpoints when Ricciardo was teammates with Verstappen, Yuki has never really had any tension with any of his teammates before. However, even as far back as early December in 2023, when I made a video talking about the 2025 driver market, I said in that video that we would see Ricciardo and Tsunoda butt heads in 2024. So whilst the tension itself doesn't surprise me, the fact that it's happened in the very first race of the season definitely caught me off guard. The reason why this toxicity doesn't surprise me is because, truth be told, this season for Ricciardo and Tsunoda is not about helping RB establish their terrible brand. It's not about working harmoniously to get the most points as a collective for the team. This season is about each driver proving that they are better than the other, because there is a very likely chance that whoever loses out in their head-to-head fight might not even be in Formula 1 next season. Even though we knew this last year, the newest season of Drive to Survive showed us some fantastic moments behind the scenes, with Horner and Ricciardo openly admitting that the only reason that Red Bull brought Ricciardo back last year and then gave him a seat for this year was to assess him as a potential replacement for Checo in 2025. Given how impressive Liam Lawson was up against Yuki during his cameo performances last year, especially in Singapore, you've got to imagine that he is a lock for the drive in 25. He has shown a huge amount of patience to sit on the sidelines, he delivered under massive pressure in very tricky circumstances, and there's no reason why he doesn't deserve a chance. Yuki to me has never been an option at Red Bull. Barring a stupendous season where he gets multiple podiums, absolutely dominates Ricciardo, and forces himself to be signed, I have just never got the vibe that either Horner or Marco even vaguely consider him a genuine option. That means that unless the stars align and Perez is dropped, Ricciardo goes to Red Bull, and therefore Yuki is left to be kept on at RB with Lawson, or one of Ricciardo or Tsunoda will be dropped from RB, and probably the Red Bull family as a whole at the end of the season. That is why this season is so important. That is why at the forefront of both of the drivers' minds is going to be how they compare to their teammates, and that is why, whether they want to admit it or not, their own interests are going to trump that of the teams, especially in a situation where one of the drivers is being made to look slower than the other. Team orders are always contentious regardless of the team. We have seen it with Red Bull, we have seen it with Ferrari, we have seen it with Mercedes, and a driver being angry at a team order that goes against them is a story as old as time. But the reason why this situation blew up as much as it did over, let's be honest, P12, was because of this underlying tension about their futures and how they compare to each other. In terms of the team order itself and then the aftermath, I'm actually quite torn because on one side, I understand why the team wanted to give Ricciardo the chance, given that he was on the softer tyre and Yuki wasn't really getting the overtake done. But on the other hand, given that Ricciardo also made absolutely no impression on K-Mag after taking the best out of his tyres, it leaves me thinking that the team should have just left Yuki out in front, as he got the place on merit, qualifying ahead of Ricciardo and being ahead in the race. The aftermath, however, leaves me disappointed with Yuki, and mostly because, as some of you might know, Yuki is actually one of my favourite drivers and a driver who I openly support. Since coming into Formula 1 in 2021, where he was over-aggressive, not mature enough, and definitely lacked the professionalism that is required to be a top-level driver, I think he has done so much to rebuild his reputation both on and off the track, as now one of the most solid and reliable drivers in the midfield. This kind of incident where you try to intimidate your teammate by sort of pretending to crash into them just reinforces the stereotype that he is still that same immature driver that he was in 2021. It does a disservice to himself and sends a bit of a message to the other top teams that maybe this guy emotionally just isn't where he needs to be to fight for wins and championships. Don't get me wrong, we have seen similar antics and confrontational radio messages before, even from top drivers like Max Verstappen when he was younger. But Max Verstappen had the talent and success to buy himself a bit more breathing room with the team during these kinds of incidents. Yuki just doesn't. As a driver in the midfield who technically at this point doesn't even have a car capable of the points, you just can't risk damaging your reputation like this in front of all of the other teams because you don't have a massively successful track record to fall back on. I also think that Yuki's anger and energy was channeled in the wrong place because Ricciardo didn't do anything wrong. It's totally understandable to be angry at your team if you feel like you didn't deserve to have your position taken away from you. But that is something that you tell them behind closed doors in the debrief, and it's not something you take out on your teammate. I think my biggest frustration with this incident is that it all distracts from the fact that Yuki was the faster and better driver this weekend. Although loads of people expect Ricciardo to beat Tsunoda over a full season and just automatically jump into that Red Bull, I think Ricciardo still needs to prove that he deserves that seat, and Yuki began this season by proving that up against a healthy Ricciardo with absolutely no asterisks, he is more than good enough to beat him and put himself in a better position with regards to his future. All of this also leaves me feeling a little bit sorry for the brand new first-time team principal, Laurent Mekies, As I said on Twitter, the man has been on the job for literally one race and already there is a civil war between his two drivers. There are absolutely no easy days at work when you're a Formula 1 team principal, but straight away his leadership qualities are going to be tested. Somehow, against the odds, he has got to nail it into his drivers' heads that they have to work together for the good of the team ahead of their own interests. And exactly how he's going to do that, I have absolutely no idea. Trust me when I say that I do not envy his position at the moment. This is a storyline that is only going to continue to become bigger and bigger. There are so many other factors that are influencing the toxicity and tension within RB right now, and I don't see it going away anytime soon. Well, there you have it. If you did enjoy this video and want to support the channel, then don't forget to subscribe. That would be massively appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.